Hey, looks like the attendees are joining. I guess for everybody who's just joining us now, welcome to ProWorkflow's webinar. Of course, talking about our soon to be released or presently being released product Nexus. Again, thanks for joining. We'll sort of be going through the product itself, I guess what you can expect. Because this webinar, we largely are sort of doing it for the benefit of our existing customers. A lot of it's going to be talking about the kind of differences between the classic product and kind of what you can expect, and specifically how those changes, or what you can expect to change when you get in there. And we'll give it a couple of minutes on this one. We're not going to wait 10 minutes. But we did have quite a large number of attendees on this one, and we're looking at about half have joined so far. So we'll give it 2 seconds. But there we go. Again, thanks so much everybody for showing up. Well, I guess just by way of introduction as well, my name's Natasha. We've also got Ashley and Dariella, who will be joining us in the speaking roles. You may recognize us as the CX team. We, of course, are the team that helps you whenever you need anything, more or less, from a member of the ProWorkflow staff. So yeah, happy to help and happy to show you the new product as of today. Cool. I'm thinking we jump into it now. It's been a couple of minutes. Awesome. So what I'm going to do is start sharing. We made a little PowerPoint. You got to make a little PowerPoint. But yeah, just sort of go through this. So like I mentioned, this is our Nexus release webinar. This is where we're going to be telling you the sort of ins and outs of the new Nexus product, and kind of what you can expect from it, and how you can expect to use it. So the general agenda that we'll be going through here is that I'm going to give a bit of a spiel at the outset. That's just going to go through some of the more generalized changes, and then we'll get a bit more specific from there, sort of going into, okay, projects, what do they look like now? How have they changed? Items, which I'll talk more about in a second. But that's another sort of big component of the new tool. Contacts has seen a bit of an overhaul as well. And then financials. We're saving the best to last there. But lots going on with financials, lots more information, lots more data to be messed around with, and a bunch more calculations available. At that point, we'll be doing a little outro Q&A. And do note that over the course of the webinar here, you can sort of type in questions as you kind of have them. So we've got another member of staff just sitting there waiting to reply to those. But we may sort of save a few for the end to sort of open up as more sort of general discussion questions as we go from there. Fantastic. All right, so I guess I'll kick us off with that general spiel that I mentioned. Let me just start the screen share again on a slightly different place. Sorry, everybody, 2 seconds. Okay, there we go. That should be coming through now. Can we see that? Can one of my other panelists maybe tell me if that's coming through?
Yep,
Yes, we can see that.
Amazing. That's just, yeah, good little step for confidence there. Okay. Cool. So, I guess to start giving you a bit of a rundown. So this, broadly speaking, is what the new Nexus product looks like. Now, obviously, it is a new product, but I guess what we've done is the idea has been that we want to use the same data that you currently have that you've been using, so all your projects, tasks, time records, etc. We wanted to make sure that you could sort of port them between each product fairly easily. So the tool's been totally rebuilt. Everything you see here, although some of it will of course look familiar, and of course it's drawing on the same generalized data sources, the tool has been basically rebuilt from the ground up. The idea is that we are going to give you access to both versions of the tool. So while Classic is the current version, and that's sort of where your URL takes you, your URL will remain the same. And once we have provided you with access to Nexus, you'll just be able to click on your initials up the top right here. And there'll be a button in this section that will basically allow you to switch versions. Now, my colleague Ashley is going to show you a little bit more about that in a second, specifically with regards to converting your projects, from the Classic version to the Nexus version. But that's, yeah, really the important thing to mention here is that Nexus and Classic, which I should clarify, by the way, Classic is just how we'll be referring to the sort of old version of ProWorkflow that you're likely using at the moment. And yeah, so you'll access everything by the same URL. It's just a case of sort of switching back and forth between versions, and it's going to be drawing from the same data sources for ease of conversion's sake. Now, vis-a-vis actually registering interest, there is going to be a questionnaire at the end of this webinar where you can basically just put your hand up and say, Nexus looks great. I'd love it if you could sort of enable my account to access it. So keep an eye out for that one. But as a generalized point, if at any point in the future you are sort of interested in grabbing Nexus, literally all you need to do is message just the support chat or a member of the team. So feel free to email support@proworkflow.com or subscriptions@proworkflow.com and just have the request ready and just sort of say, hey, we'd like our account to be upgraded. And we can do that for you. So that, I guess, yeah, sort of covers, I guess, the generalized stuff. Some other things to mention. This is going to be a continually improving tool. So sort of, of course, while we are using the tool ourselves, working through things, we're getting feedback. We're going to be making improvements as we can. So this is just the version at release. Another thing is that obviously one of the most sort of jarring changes is the fact that the UI has been overhauled pretty extensively. So the main thing that I just wanted to mention at this stage is that, again, although things look quite different, remember that the data points are largely the same. And so although we're not dealing with a nav bar, we're dealing with a sidebar now. You'll notice that we've still kind of got a job section. We've got an item section, we've got a time section, etc. So something to be ready for there. Another big point about the upgrade to Nexus is that items. So I've mentioned that a couple of times now. And yeah, we'll get more into the sort of specifics of what items are in a second. But the generalized point and the main thing that you need to remember here is they are kind of the stand-in replacement for tasks. And I suppose more than that, they're kind of replacing a few different functions. But the idea was items are sort of meant to encapsulate a lot of things about your project. So whereas before, we had the task section in your project, we had sort of expenses down the side. We've got sort of a few disparate things located all over the place. We've solidified that. We've put it all into items. So now an item could be a task. It could be a material. It could be an expense. It could be any number of things. It's really just referring to a given project component. It could even be something more abstract, like a milestone. But really the idea here is flexibility, and it's just giving you as many options as you need to kind of have to really, I guess, describe your project in a way that works best for you. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about this rather when we get to the financial section. But a big thing to mention kind of out of the gate is that whereas before ProWorkflow could only really talk in terms of what you were charging your client, so it was all really dealing with, various tasks have charge rates, you track time against the charge rates, you invoice based on all of that information. ProWorkflow now does cost tracking as well. So as well as keeping track of what we're charging your client, we're keeping track of what you are, paying a given employee to do a certain task, what a certain material or expense might have cost you in order to complete a project. And with that information, we're having a far more complete idea about your project's margins, about profitability, even a little bit of forecasting. But something to be thinking about from the get-go, with your conversion to Nexus, is just, how am I going to explain that data? How am I going to get that into the tool, and sort of how do I get the most out of that? Checking my notes here. I guess the only last things to mention, there's been a lot of visual updates. So the Kanban board is new, the Gantt chart is new, the filtering is new. You'll notice some of the main buttons here, for instance, view all work is a very popular function that we sort of have with ProWorkflow, and that's going to be changing as well. Now Ashley's going to talk a little bit more about that now. In fact, I might actually kick the sort of share over. So yeah, I guess that's all the generalized stuff. Feel free to pop in any questions that you have about that. But in the meantime, let's jump over and yeah, get that slightly more deep dive going on projects.
Awesome. Thanks, Natasha. Are you seeing my screen now?
Certainly can.
Perfect. Hi, everybody. We're going to talk a little bit more about projects first. As Natasha mentioned, I think most of you are probably coming over from Classic at this stage, so we are going to take a look at converting a Classic project into a Nexus project. It is actually super easy. So you start off on your home page here, and as she mentioned, the new navigation, you've got your sidebar here underneath jobs or projects or whatever you've chosen to name this section. You will have active, completed, and classic. So we're going to go to classic. We're going to go to our classic project. You can see you've got some tasks there. You've got your what you're used to seeing as your classic layout. And then we're just going to click the little ellipsis and convert to Nexus. It's going to ask you if you're sure. We are, in fact, sure. So we're going to go ahead and convert. And now our classic project is a Nexus project. We're going to look at a different project to look at some of the details, but you will see that it has pulled over the tasks. They are now items, and it even has pulled in through the time that has already been tracked on those, so you don't need to worry that you're going to lose data when you're converting over. Let's go back to our main jobs list. So these are all of our Nexus projects that we've got on this. And instead, in Classic, you will possibly have been used to the View All tool. We're not using that in Nexus. Instead, what we've got is upgraded filtering options. So we've got this My Items section, and that is where you could choose to look at, say, instead of just your work, somebody else on your team or multiple members of your team. We are also able to filter by work stage on this page, which lets you choose any of the available work stages. It's a lot less binary than in Classic. You just had active and completed, but now we've got as many stages as you want, actually. You can add these in settings, change the colors associated to them. You can have as many active ones as you want, as many completed ones as you want, and that just gives you more flexibility. On this page, what this is useful for is filtering what you're looking at. So here we're looking at all of our work stages, but if we wanted to, say, only look at our confirmed projects, we could filter by that work stage, and that'll show us that. We also, on this page, have options for looking not just at a list, but also at our board and our Gantt chart. So our board view is pretty neat for at a glance, looking at what's going on with your projects. So especially here, we've got this filtered to show all of your work stages. So you can see these ones are pending, this one is confirmed. And same with the list, you can choose to filter and just see the ones that you want to see on this. Let's take a look at a particular project. So here we see, in addition to our nav bar, we've got some project-specific navigation when we view one. We're just going to hide that for right now, and we'll take a look at that again later. And in fact, I'm just going to collapse the side navigation, and you can see the project like that. But if you want to really drill down on your project and not have any kind of distractions whatsoever, we've got this little expand button, and that'll take you full screen, so you're just looking at what's going on in your project. Another thing that's changed about the layout here is that instead of having to scroll down a whole bunch to get to different modals like you did in Classic, we've now added this tabbing system. So you've got your details separate from your items, separate from your financial summary, separate from, say, messages, and etc. That just keeps things a little bit neater. It keeps you from having to scroll and search for things. It keeps things more handy for you right up here. Let's go back briefly to our jobs list. Now, we also have bulk editing features for projects. So as you'll see up here, I've ticked all of them, but you could just tick a couple of them, and we can change contacts, categories, dates, tags, priority, or work stage for all of these at once if we want to. Another thing you'll notice in the nav here is we've got our favorite section. So if we want to favorite a project, we just click this little star here. This one is already favorited, so we can see that it appears on the favorite list. If we want to unfavorite it, it removes it from the list. That is also something that you can do with reports. So you can favorite reports that you're using, and those will appear right here on the list as well for ease of access. Now, as we are looking at this project, you can see that my colleague, Michelle Hendricks, is also active on this page. That's a new feature that we've got. So you can see who is looking at / working on a project at any given time. The other really cool thing is that if we go to our description field here, we can see that Michelle is actively editing the description. And not only can we see what she is typing, but we can see that it is her that is typing it. And if we click this little time icon here, we can see the history of revisions. So it's a little bit like Google Docs. You can see who's done what, and if you click on the time entry, it'll even take you back to that time to when that was. So you can see here, when I started this, there wasn't anything. You can see where we added some stuff, and you can see that we've made some changes, and this is where we are now. And we've got a restore button. So let's say that we actually wanted this and we did not want what Michelle has updated here. We could click the restore button and go back to that, but I'm not going to do that to her right now. Um, let's go to our projects list again. So we have on both on projects and on items, which my colleague Dariella will talk a little bit more about, we have this ellipsis for more actions, and that's going to give you more options on the list view of projects or the list view of your items without having to go into the project itself. So like I was showing you about favoriting, you could do that right here instead of going into the project to need to do that. Or say edit the tags or even clone or add items directly from this list view. Likewise, with this list view, you can see we're looking at a lot of data here. If you don't want to look at this much data, you can go into your columns and choose to only look at what you want to look at. So right now, that would show us no columns. We don't necessarily want to do that. So let's say we only wanted to look at what's going on with our workflow. We can do that, and it's going to show us just those columns. And you see there's no scrolling to do here. Or let's say we wanted to look at our financials, we could get rid of those workflow columns, click into the financial columns and the forecasting columns. And now we're taking a look at a glance on our projects list of what's going on with our current financials as well as our projections, our financial forecasting. And Natasha is going to talk more about that when she talks about financials towards the end of this presentation. That said, it is pretty cool that we do have these new financial forecasting columns and sections. So all of these are new to Nexus, especially this margin. I think that you're going to find that really neat, and Natasha is going to talk more about that. Another important update here, the Gantt chart. So we talked about the list and we talked about the board, the Gantt chart, and this applies both to this and to the Gantt charts within projects, which we'll take a look at after I show you this one, can now be exported. So you can export that as a PDF. We have lots of options for exporting with regards to, do you want to look at just a month, a quarter, a week, a day? You can choose to zoom in and out. You can change the start date. You have all of these options here for what you want that to look like. You can even change what size of PDF you're going to export it to. And that is exactly the same on the project Gantt chart. So you have that export tool, and you can also choose in here to zoom in and out or to scale. And that's a lot different from Classic. I know we've had a lot of you requesting exporting especially, and so I think that that will make life a lot easier for most of you. Another new thing to the project page is, in addition to those financial tools that I was showing you in the list view, we have this handy dandy insights module. So there's a little button right here. It says show insights. When we click that, it pops up our insights widgets. Now those can also be modified the same way that columns have. So we've got all of these available, but if say you wanted to only have time at a glance and you didn't care about your financials, or you really cared about your financials, you can customize that however you would like. like let's get rid of the items overview and the date and the time and say that we're only concerned about money. And now when we come to this project, that's right there. So we know that, say, our forecast has decreased by $51, and maybe we are concerned about that. And now we can pay attention to that easily. One last thing that I want to mention before I kick it over to my colleague Dariella is that going back to this section that I mentioned, we have a history here as well. So kind of like the revisions history that we had for our real-time editing, we have our workstage history. So we can tell here what's happened on the project. We can tell that Michelle is the one that created it and what date and even what time that happened. Here you see that Mina changed it to in review yesterday and then back to in progress. And that's related to this work stage status that we see here. So if I change it to pending, then we're going to see that that is also added to the work stage history. So that is just so that, again, you can keep track of who is doing what on your project. All right, that is going to be it for our general project overview. I'm going to kick it over to Dariella now, who's going to talk more about items.
Oh, hello, everyone. Well, thank you for that, Ash. I'm just going to share my screen now. And yeah, so can you confirm I'm sharing?
And confirm you're sharing.
Good, thanks. So I just want to take you back to the settings page just to show you item types, because as Nat mentioned, our tasks in Classic are items now, and this is mostly because items are comprehending a different variety of tasks, let's say. So it could be a task, a material, our expense, etc. And the main thing to know about this is that a task can be measured in time hours and a material can be measured in quantity, or you can measure either of them in both in hours and quantity. So I just wanted to clarify this before diving into items itself. But also know that these are the ones that I've selected to have enabled now. But if you come to the Enable Item Types button, you will see that you have a whole range of different items that you can add to your project, to your account, so then to your project. Also, before jumping to a project, I wanted to mention work stages very quickly. Because as Nat said, we have all these stages that are for jobs, but we also have them for items, and they can be independent to each other. So your job can advance in a certain way, and your items can advance in another way too. Now I'm going to go to a project that is empty at the moment because I want to show you 3 different ways of adding items. So you can add items by copy pasting them. I have a little list here to demonstrate this. And I'll go paste them here. And from here, I can decide if this one is a task, this one is a material, and I can even expand the task just to add more information to it. I'm going to create this one right now. And my different options to add items have disappeared now, but from this page, we still have them in the more action buttons here. So if I click in here, excuse me, I'll have different options. So you can add from a template and add from Excel. So I'll quickly take you to the templates here, just to show you that it's pretty much as in our classic version. I'm going to click on this template. But we have this really cool thing that Ashley showed you, columns, that you can add here as well. So before in Classic, you had like start date, due date, contacts, and pretty much what you're seeing here right now. But you can add different fields now, just as you can add them in the projects page, as Ashley showed you before. I'm just going to quit this one. I'm going to come back to my project to import the template. And this is it. So I have my template here now. It looks a bit crowded, but that's okay because I created another project just to show you in more detail every item. This is just to demonstrate you how I can import items. And the last way to do it is by importing an Excel spreadsheet. This one is really important because what you need to know here is that you have to generate a template in order for us to be able to import this for you, because we need the right template to be filled in. And from here, you're going to choose the fields that you normally like to add for your item, and you can select a date format. Once you have selected all the items, the fields that you want to add for your item, you'll generate the template. And I'm going to cancel this now because I've already generated a template for you. And you're gonna, once you fill in all the information, you are gonna come here again and you're gonna say, I already have a template, and import it here. So this is the template that I've already pre-filled for this webinar purposes. And this is it. Because I've used the template, I have a neat import right now in my project. I'm gonna go now to another project that is not that crowded, so I can show you a little bit more about items. Just have a quick look on my notes. We have this really cool new thing that is bulk actions. So before in Classic, we used to have Add Edit Tasks button. You may remember that one. We don't have that anymore, but we can just do bulk actions. So if you select more than one task, you'll have this power tool up here where you can complete, delete your tasks, your items, change work stages, priority dates. Sometimes I remember a few customers want to have asked, can I just change the date of this item 2 weeks after, but you want to change it for 10 items and you have to go one by one. So this is a cool thing that you can have now. Due date as well, and even accounting tax codes and financials, which is a really cool thing that we have now, and that we'll explain in more depth later in the webinar. We also have, I'm going to quit this now. We also have header tasks. Well, what we used to call header tasks in Classic, we call phases now, which are still going to summarize your items in the last line of the phase, let's call it. And this is really good because it's going to be very helpful for your reports. You'll be able to build reports out of phases. And we know that a lot of you have been wanting this for a while. Another thing to mention is that all editing occurs on the page now. Well, I kind of already said this, and this is because, we don't have the Add Edit Task button, so we use the power tool. And as in Classic, we just edit the task here or change the dates as we used to do it. Now, I want to show you the item model. In Classic, we used to click on a task and the task will expand and show you all the details of it. Now you click on the task item. We have to get used to call them items, sorry, because we always talk about tasks.
We'll get there, Derry. We'll get there.
So you click on the item model opens up, and you'll see the details, the description. In this description, I've added a table, I've added a checklist, even a quote, and you'll see that you have a lot of different things to add in here, insert, and different formattings for you to add in your description as well. As Ashley showed you before in your project, you'll have a revision history, and this very cool tool, you'll have it in your item as well. So you click in here and you'll be able to see the different versions that had been added before, and you can restore them as well. So if Nat came and deleted my table for a reason, I can go back and just restore it.
I do that all the time, don't I?
Nah, just kidding. And then you also have, the tabs as we have it in the projects. We separate different tabs for important things. So you have the details, the time tracked. Now it has its own tab, and messages. Then going back to the sidebar, you'll have your work stage history, same as the project. You'll see that the item has been finished by mistake. That was me actually, and I was like, oops, it hasn't been finished because the webinar hasn't happened yet. So I put it back to do in progress and then finished. because I wanted to put more history in it. So there we go. And you can add files to it as well. Oh, and two other cool things about item model is that just as Ashley showed you in the project, you'll have the active people looking at the project as Ashley showed you, you'll also have it in the item. So if someone else is looking at this item, you'll have the little bubble of the person here showing as active, and you'll also see the in live, how do we call it? In live editor? Yeah, in the description.
Real-time
Real life
editing.
editor, yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So if Ashley or Nat are writing something at the same time, we'll see it as well. And you can also favorite this item, and when you favorite, you'll see it in your sidebar. I just went out so I don't leave my item. You'll see it in your sidebar, in your menu, in your favorites tab. So you'll have a favorites. I have two projects favorited and this item here. And it's really cool because then I'll click in it, and no matter where I am on ProWorkflow, I can click on my item and work on it. Yeah, so that's it regarding the item model. And last but not least, we also have different fields that we can add to the items, just as in projects Ashley showed you. We go to our columns button and we can add more general information, workflow, time, progress, financial forecast. And in my one, I've added these ones. I didn't really mind so much about the general one, and I saved this view for financials. So you can save views, which is very cool. And I've saved this one just because I wanted to show you that now we have forecasting, which is very cool. But I'm not going to talk about that one. Nat is going to talk about that in more detail because she's very good at it. And
Oh,
and yeah, that's pretty much it about items.
thanks so much,
Awesome.
Sarah. Yeah.
Yeah, now, sorry, Ashley will continue with contacts.
Yeah. Can I get you to stop sharing your screen? It's not going to let me.
Sure, sorry.
No worries.
Yeah, nailed it.
Awesome. Alrighty. So right, like Derry said, we're going to talk about contacts now. And one of the biggest differences about contacts is that instead of having all of your contacts on one page, we now have clients and staff separate. So if we go to our client section here, oh dear, my internet. Here we are. And here is our clients. So this is just clients. It's not also staff. It's also a lot neater because instead of having every single individual person that say works for a client company listed out separately, they are grouped by company. So we can see here that North Coast Collective has Yelena as their main contact. They also have these people as their other contacts, but we don't have to have a giant list of all of these people. That's not particularly useful. Instead, they're all together. You can add, and this is new for Nexus, you can add individuals as client contacts. So say you're a construction company and you are doing a job and that job is just for Bob. We can go in here and we can add, and instead of doing a business, because Bob isn't a business, we can choose to make that a person. So we just go Bob. We're doing it for Bob, so we're going to name the organization Bob. I'm not going to do a real email here because he's not a real person, but we can create that. And here's Bob. And Bob is going to come in and he's going to be a client contact, but it's just Bob, and we can do that. The other really neat thing, one of my favorite things about this dashboard is that we can see recent activity if we want to. So say you are a big company and you have a lot of clients, but you only want to look at clients that you are actively or have recently looked at, we can do that. So here we're looking at the last 3 days of clients. You can see Bob because I just added him. But if we looked at, say, show all, you can see that that's a lot more than our last 3 days clients. Another neat overview thing that we have for this client page is that much like with our projects list and with our items list, we have columns, and those columns, once again, can be customized. I think that's a word that we're going to use a lot in this presentation because that's one of the main things about Nexus is that it is super easy to customize it to your needs. So let's say we don't care about what's going on with time tracking or general, we really just want to look at money, and we can do that. Whoopsie doopsie, I just hit back on my screen. That is okay. We can fix that. But it would be helpful to at least know what client we were talking about. Now we have that. So this gives us an at-a-glance glimpse of what's going on with our quotes and our invoices. It's going to show you recent figures. And you can choose to hide that if that's not something that you're interested in. Say you're only interested in the work that's going on. We can look at that too. You can see here we're integrated with Xero, so it's going to be pulling in our Xero clients as well. We have other integrations that you can do, of course. Addresses have also been improved. I'm going to give us a little bit more information here with regards to our contacts. So if we open up, say, North Coast Collective, we can see that their primary address is located here in Wellington. But if they say are a international conglomerate and they have lots of different addresses, we can add all of those addresses here and the system will support that. So they have their main address, but we can see they also have an office in Perth. And we could choose to add even more addresses across the globe if we wanted to. Meanwhile, if we want to take a look at staff, that's in its own section. So that's here. Again, much like our clients list, you can see at a glance information here. We can see how many items are actively assigned to a particular member. We can see what role. We can see what team or group they're in if you're on our advanced plan and you're using teams and groups. And we can even see that Michelle here has 3 items overdue. If we open up Michelle, her staff widget is going to give us the information of what jobs she's assigned to and what items she's assigned to, as well as even what time has been tracked on the items that she is assigned to. And in fact, we can see that Michelle has not tracked any time this week, but if she had, oh, nope, I stand corrected. It just took it a second to load. She has. I'm wrong. I was talking smack about Michelle for no good reason. She has tracked time this week. And that is all information that we can see in the staff module now without having to pick around and try to find what things she's assigned to. It's really easy. I think that is all for me. I'm going to kick it back to Natasha, who is going to talk about our super cool financial features.
Thanks so much, Ash. That was really helpful. As Ash mentioned, I will be continuing on just with financials, which is very cool, very exciting. I might actually just keep going from that same place because I guess as a part of financials, of course, we're going to be mentioning the fact that our accounting integrations are back. As far, we have only linked in our 2 most popular accounting options. So if you are using a different one, specifically MyOb is the one that I have in mind. We'll be getting to that shortly. Close on that one, but for the time being, Xero and QuickBooks are the 2 available accounting services. Now, these integrations are a little bit more interesting than they were before, for the sake of, before it was really just a case of, you could create your invoices in ProWorkflow based off, the rates and the time records that we had in there, fire them over to whatever the accounting provider was, and then the accounting provider would basically say, cool, we've got that in drafts, and then eventually, when that gets paid, cool, we've got that paid, sends that information back to ProWorkflow, and then ProWorkflow says, fantastic, let's archive that invoice, it's been paid off, that's great. Whilst the general flow of sending invoices from or to whatever the accounting platform is remains to be largely the same, the amount of information that we're getting back has increased quite a bit. So for instance, probably the easiest place to see it first is your accounting codes. So in the case of Xero, quite useful because their accounting codes are generally standardized, which is quite handy. So syncing that through from Xero just means all of those standardized accounting codes that do come from Xero are just immediately pulled into your ProWorkflow account. And you can go ahead and put those, into the relevant items, into your quotes, into your invoices, even into your item templates. So you can kind of just have, the relevant accounting code attached to the item from the beginning, which basically means you don't have to think about it at any given point because it's going to be carried all the way through to the invoice at the other end. Now, as well as that, we've got our sort of hourly rates, products and services. So these are slightly different things. When it comes to I guess how things are phrased. But the point is here that you've now got sort of a more expansive library that's sitting in your settings that you can then sort of apply goods and services, fixed cost items, hourly services, and then a series of hourly rates which you can choose from when you have a given item that does require an hourly rate. So, like I say, a little bit more information back from your accounting provider. Now, as well as that, if you do come back to your invoices section, there is a button just across the top here, or rather, it might actually be better if we go from the client section. Just across the top here, and of course, if you're using QuickBooks and eventually MyOb, it'll be a equivalent branded button. But if we do click on that, it'll see that, we've basically just got increased capabilities of just pulling your clients in, from whatever that platform might be, which is a bit better than before, where it was kind of just doing a text matchy kind of thing, where it was looking for who have you got in Xero, who have you got in ProWorkflow. Cool, we can sync that up, and we know that, ABC here is the same as ABC here. Now it's just straight up gonna pull everybody from that platform in, which, to our mind is a lot better. So like I say, the accounting integrations have been improved somewhat substantially, which is really nice to see. Now, I'd just like, I guess, before we continue to talk about our finances, just want to quickly jump back to our item types, just because they are, relevant to this sort of conversation. And I guess one thing that I wanted to mention about these item types, Derry's obviously done a good job of talking about them already, but we do have a lot of them here, especially when you look at this enable item types list. There's a lot of stuff. Now, a lot of them are kind of phrased around software development, and that might be a bit of a byproduct of, ProWorkflow for a while here have been the main users of the Nexus product, which means that's kind of colored some of the options that we've used. But keep in mind that with any of these items, you can change the icon that we've given you here. You can change what it's called. You can change the description. And then, of course, you can basically determine whether a given item type is going to be tracked in terms of, hours and labor, or if it's something that you'd rather deal with quantity and then sort of cost per quantity. And in the case of any given item type that you have here, you can choose a default rate. You can choose a default sort of product or service rate that would be attached to it as well. And keep in mind, this is all available for you when it comes to things like reports, and basically other mentions in the tool where you might need to filter things. So they are a very powerful kind of categorization tool. And we'll see more of those in just a second. I guess the other important thing to mention about items, specifically with respect to financials, is that the classic version of ProWorkflow, and this was kind of one of the, I guess, another one of our incentives when it comes to the item system and kind of why we change things in such a radical way, is that items as a term is something that was standardized across the entire tool. So what I mean by that is quotes and invoices also now have items, as opposed to kind of having their own system. For instance, you might remember with quotes, you could turn a quote into a project, and within a quote, there were things called task rates, which were a variety of line item that you could add, and those would then kind of be converted into tasks, and some of those base values would be carried through as well. Now the system is much more advanced in the sense that if I do jump to our quotes here, and I just take a look at any random one of these and click into it, you'll see that our item section is virtually the same as you would expect to see. So we've got the various item types that we can kind of add in here. So we're saying that, say, phase 1, for instance, has 3 tasks at the beginning. We've then got an information item, which is sort of a document that you'll notice doesn't sort of have any rates attached to it, but is nonetheless sort of a deliverable that's a part of the phase. And then we've also got travel to site listed as an expense. So this is kind of a good demonstration of items and their usefulness. Like I mentioned earlier, it allows you to be a lot more specific about your project and sort of what components work into each given thing. Also a good time to mention, now that we can kind of see one here. So this expense is one of the ones that we've termed, as opposed to, again, being in labor and hours. This is one that we've, we've kind of said that there might be a rate. Actually, as I say that, the unit type is hours, ironically, which is in this case a bit distinct. But you'll see here that because it's an expense, I'm able to actually alter the unit type to basically describe that, there is a certain number of something that I require. Unfortunately, in this case, it did just happen to be the exact same variety as the other ones that we have here, which is great for something akin to travel time. But nonetheless, it's something that you can do, and a way to distinguish something like travel time, which is technically hours required, but it's not quite the same as a sort of build hours situation. So not a redundancy, but maybe a bad example in the circumstances. Now, why is it useful? I guess I've gone on about the whole fact that sort of quotes and invoices all have these item things attached to them. Why is that a good thing? Basically, it means that converting your project between states is going to be much easier. So in the case of quotes, I can very quickly come into a project, and this is filled up with items. I've sort of got a project that I'm kind of midway through here. I've done the first phase, I'm working on the second, and everything else is basically left in a to-do state. But I guess consider that your project flow might be something that requires you to kind of sit down, do a bit of scoping with the client. Maybe you've got about 40 hours worth of work that might need to happen before you can actually produce a quote. For that reason, useful to track those 40 hours and actually what's required, what built them up. But equally, the contract might not go through at the end of it. So you don't necessarily want to plan the entire project before you've kind of gone through that discovery phase. In a lot of cases, you probably won't be able to plan the entire project until that discovery phase has happened. So, to that effort, turning your project into a quote or vice versa is something that can happen at any time. So if it turns out that you are going to be engaging in this quote, well, great, let's send them through a quote. Let's build the project out in our item list here, and then we'll develop a quote based off of this. Or it could happen in the vice versa kind of way. You kind of just have these initial tasks that are ready to go here. You finish those off. That's your scoping tasks. You've then got your quote built out, and that'll detail a certain number of activities that you need to do going into the future. Another good time to mention that because items are going to contain all of the same information, as a project item, so quote items, project items, same thing, you can actually come in here and state, what the start and finish dates might be for all of these given things from a quote. So again, the idea is that no matter how you work, ProWorkflow is flexible enough, is customizable enough to eliminate double entry wherever that may occur. And that's kind of the main advantage that we're dealing with here. So there's a lot of kind of, I guess, creature comforts that we've included to make these things easier. Invoices have seen some similar improvements where, like before, I guess you can sort of create, invoices based off of, the data that we've already collected. But we've made it a little bit easier in terms of, now you can be a bit more selective with what you've used, as well as being able to determine I want to invoice for a certain time period. You could just say I want to invoice for the design phase, just the one phase, continue from there, and that'll preview our item for just the, the handful of things that we've got listed in that phase, which is fantastic. Now, I guess we've talked a lot about, the various financial fields that have kind of been added to any given item. Let's actually explore this and let's explain kind of what they mean and why they're useful. So in the first section here, I'll just go through the columns and just make sure. Yep, looks like I've got everything that we need to talk about enabled. That's great. So yeah, start and finish date, we already know about that. Billable, a task being billable or not, still easy. Now, a quantity and hours section. So the reason it's quantity hours is, of course, because in the case of some items, you're going to be dealing with hours, and then in others, you're going to be dealing with quantity. So I've got a nice little delineation between those two here. Modeling, drawings, product concepts, that's all going to be something that requires, a person to sit down and spend their time on it. Something like aluminium, not so much. That's a, sort of 12 units, again, of whatever sort of variety that we choose to select here. I have never personally bought aluminium in large quantities, but by the roll, maybe. Who's to say? Who's to say? But regardless, something that you can track in here as well. Now, we do allow you to sort of make a distinction. So the next column here is allocated. Now, it's going to depend, basically. This is sort of the I guess, billable quantity in hours, but it might be that you've maybe got a little bit more time sort of allocated. You'll see here that although there might be a difference, you can just sort of have it automatically linked. But again, if you do want there to sort of be a distinction, maybe 8 hours of a given item you consider to be billable, But, realistically, I know my staff members are probably going to need a little bit more time, or maybe there's some extra administrative activities or review processes that need to occur either end. As such, my expectation is that this task will take 10 hours, but what's being billed for is only going to be 8. Time spent is a kind of standardized field. You'll remember it from before, from the classic product. Much like before, we've got timers that you can add. You can either add time manually, you can start a timer. And we've also got a timesheet page, which I actually might just quickly show you because that has been vastly improved as well. I guess more from a visual standpoint, but we now have sort of summaries across the top. It's kind of easier to shift back and forth. You can zoom in and out. You can focus on different days. And much like before, you've got sort of customizing as to how things are formatted and how time is rounded. But visually speaking, the whole thing is generally much improved and quite a lot nicer. But the general concept of clicking and dragging to track time remains to kind of be the case. Now, jumping back to our project, that's how the time spent roughly works. So the next column here is something that where it automatically gets calculated. So there's not a sort of capacity to manually edit this, but it's just breaking down immediately the percentage of your time allocated that has been spent as far. So 5 hours, 55 minutes of 10 hours allocated is 59.17% of the time that we had available being spent already. So that's quite good, just by itself, just sort of allows you to kind of think about the project in sort of slightly more real terms than the number of hours spent, which can, in some cases, feel a little bit abstract. But it's really nicely contrasted with this next field, which can actually only be entered manually. So this one isn't a calculated field. But the idea behind it is that your staff members are basically able to come in here and state, this is how much of this task I think has been completed at this point in time. So a little bit different from just purely how much time has been spent. It might be a situation like this one, where although about 60% of the time has been spent, this staff member thinks that about 67% of the task is finished. So basically, we're actually working at a slightly more advanced rate. Now, it might not be that things get specific as, 67%. It might just be that you're rounding to, sort of 10% intervals. But regardless, a very useful thing to have that the staff can sort of make an assessment as to how far through they are something, because as we go further, that's actually the basis on which we can make some determinations of profitabilities and margins. Apologies, was holding that one in for a bit. There you go. So moving on from here, rates, like I say, big improvements here, in the sense that now we have both cost and charge. So basically, what am I paying somebody to do this work? And then what am I charging my client for this work being done? If I just scroll down very slightly here to one of these items, you'll notice that it's functionally the same thing, but again, we're dealing with quantity and cost per quantity in this case. So it's cost price and a sale price. What does it cost me to obtain a unit of this item, and what am I selling each unit for? In each case, you'll see that we've actually calculated basically the profit and then the subsequent profit margin, and then what the markup is. And you can actually edit these, and sort of that'll affect the rest of the data as well. So if you do kind of want to jump things up a little bit, maybe increase your margins by 5%, we can go through and tell you what that'll actually do to the cost price, etc. We also have, maybe before we move on from the rate section, it's worth mentioning that you don't actually need to use both fields. So for instance, it might be a case where you've got an expense that you don't intend to on-charge your client for. In that case, you are totally within your rights to just say, hey, this is purely going to be a cost activity. This is something that's going to be taking away from the total budget of the project, not going to be contributing to any of the revenue. As such, I'm leaving it like this. Totally valid way of using the tool here as well. It can be that there are instances where maybe, yeah, there are just things that you are purely charging your client for. There isn't sort of a cost component attached to them, or vice versa. But worth mentioning, because again, this is all going to be used in calculations later on. We're going to be using it to sort of determine profits and totals, and then those are, of course, going to go to your overall contributions that Ashley mentioned earlier, just across the top of the screen here. As I guess, yeah, a little bit of a follow-on to that, you can also include things like discounts, which will be applied on a per line item basis, but it might be that maybe you do want to create a new item purely to contain sort of a discount, if it's not necessarily specific to a given item. But in the case that you do that, you can either do so on the basis of a percentage, so a percentage of the total cost, or just a fixed value discount. Tax percentages here, again, this is going to be pulled from your accounting platform. You'll see here that I've got sales, other revenue, interest, and then cost of goods sold might be an option that I'd use on the other ones, but there are, again, tax codes associated with these in the background, which is great. Now, these subsequent fields. So total is basically going to be a determination of your charge rate. That's going to be talking about your charge rate against your time allocated. So, assumed hours that you'll be spending against the rate that things will be charged at. The total value of this task, and I guess a revenue term, would be this value here. The next one is calculated the same, but instead of using your allocated figure, it's going to be using your actually spent figure. So in this case, we're seeing the difference between 10 hours against $100 per hour and 55 5 hours and 55 minutes against that same sort of rate. So we're coming out at a slightly more irregular value. Profit is going to be assumed, again, based on the allocated figure. So we're sort of going for the idea that, by the end of this task, if you spend the amount of time that you said you'd spend, that's, the sort of amount that you can expect to receive based on what you're paying somebody to do it and what you are charging your client to have it done. Accounting code is another one that's just going to be coming straight from zero. So we've got that there. And generally these fields are going to be linked, as I mentioned. Now, the remainder we're dealing with sort of margin. So these are going to be impacted by a couple of things. If we're talking about an item that has been, completed, we're sort of making the assessment that it's been finished. Like these ones at the top here. You'll notice in these cases, I basically have completed them, and in doing so, I've spent a bit less time than was allocated. So I've worked at an advanced rate, and I finished things ahead of schedule. Looking over here, our standard margin for that would have been 42%. So I could have expected to basically see a return of that. That would have been my profit margin. Because I've completed things that much quicker, that's actually gone up to 70%. So my margin has improved a lot. And then we've kind of got these plus and minus, these sort of variance stats, basically, to kind of say that, okay, cool. Well, you saved an hour and 50, which is great. And that means that the profit was impacted by $580, which is amazing. And again, these stats are summarized, on across the top of the project here. So we can kind of see that, okay, we're actually ahead on the forecast of hours allocated, and that, subsequently will mean that we can expect a greater value. And if we click on this one, it'll actually give you the breakdown of how that forecast is calculated and kind of what that means. But this is, referring directly to profits here. So we'll see that although we would have expected to have about nearly $900 as a profit figure, that's been improved to nearly by double, which is really, really, really positive to see. So if you have a project manager, a great place to be looking just to see how things are tracking. And this section here specifically is a really good one to be keeping an eye on. Now that's for things that you've already completed. That's for stuff that we've worked at an advanced rate, we've tracked as much time as we needed, we finished it off, we were ahead of schedule. That's what that means. For ongoing items, so these ones here, you'll see that these are still marked as in progress and basically come under the active category as opposed to the finished one, or the completed one rather. For that, this is where that kind of manual percentage starts to come in, because here we're kind of saying that we are 7% ahead relative to kind of the time we've allocated and tracked, which means that we've gone from a 40% profit margin to a 47% profit margin. The idea here is basically stating that if we continue to work at the advanced rate that we're working at, then we will ultimately see a time saving of an hour and 12 minutes and a cost saving, so of 120. And then subsequently, our profit is going to improve by about $70 as well. So you'll actually see all of these sort of tiny components as you're working through the projects, as well as when you're finished. So a really, really nice way of kind of staying on top of your projects and making sure that you've got a really good idea of not only how everything has gone, but where everything is going. And the idea here, hopefully, is that you'll be able to, catch things, I guess, before anything becomes a problem. So that is, I guess, kind of the good bulk of the financial information here is just the transference between any given sort of state between quotes, invoices, and projects, and then how that actually gets presented in terms of items down the bottom here. Now, just to kind of show you, I guess, what it looks like if things maybe aren't tracking so well, as was implied by that project. you'll notice that I've got the aptly titled tracking positively and tracking negatively. So sort of a project in roughly the same phase, but yeah, we're about 12 hours behind. And at the point that we are in the project, we've lost about $400 already. And again, this is assuming that we continue with this at the rate that we're going, which is a bit less positive. But there's a bit of a mix here. So you'll kind of see as you go, geez, I lost 3 hours here, lost 3 hours here. That means although I did well on this task, ultimately that still didn't come out ahead for me. But it's a nice demonstration of basically the phases that Darry mentioned earlier. Because not only for a given item can we come in and kind of see, okay, here's what's happened, here's the expectation, here's what's happened, but we can kind of see on a per phase basis, okay, so the design phase in general has still made us money, but the sort of workshop activity that we did seems to have kind of been a bit more costly than, we might have liked. So is this time to sort of have a bit of a discussion about these workshops? Should we maybe be limiting the time that we spend on them? Should we maybe be reducing the staff input that tends to go into them? So we've sort of got a bit less, we're a bit less resource intensive, when it comes to this stuff. Now, I guess because we kind of have mentioned a lot of important financial. Actually, just before I do move on, we also have the financial page, which is I guess I am sure there is an equivalent financial document to which I have forgotten the name, but I guess the entire thing here is just kind of sitting here dealing with your estimated cost, estimated price on a per phase basis, discovery, design, etc. Those are the phases that we had listed in the item section. And as we work through, these actuals are going to be filled out, but again, allocation side and then the actual time spent side. And then of course, when we go through an invoice and these activities, we'll be able to keep track of things here. But if you are kind of a higher level manager, this is a great place to be sitting just to kind of work this stuff out. I'd also like to make mention of the fact that we did retain our sensitive business information permission. Obviously, because you don't necessarily need to have every single staff member in the tool, or that you might have working on this various item set here, being quite as intimately familiar with all of this financial information. So pretty much anything that I've mentioned in my portion of the talk here is termed as sensitive business info. And you'll notice that if you do, no harm to actually go in there now, as I say it. So for any given staff member that you might have, really no issue to just remove this one permission here. And that'll ensure that, the information that's private is going to remain as such, really. And just as I guess as a quick way to maybe check that, if you do go to your staff page, there is an org chart section, and it's going to list all of your staff members out, as well as, the various teams, etc. that they might have. But you'll see the roles on the left-hand side here are color-coded. So in this case, administrator is green, project manager is red, and team member is blue. So you can kind of quickly just look through this list here and kind of see, okay, who are administrators? Great. These people, it's Michelle, it's Rio, it's Mina by the looks of things. Great, cool. They'll be able to see the financial information. It looks like nobody else would. Handy, easy, makes things just a little bit better, I guess, in terms of how you're kind of going through these things. Cool. Well, I guess one last thing I wanted to mention just with regards to work status, because very useful system existing across jobs, items, quotes, and invoices. We've got a lot of options in terms of sort of, I guess, how we phrase things. The difference, I guess, is with invoices, if we do have an integration partner, we are going to be using their work stages. So this becomes a little bit less customizable in the case that we are sort of integrated. So if I go to my invoices page here, you'll see that it's very easy for me to kind of send something over to Xero. Just with that button there, I can sort of use the checkboxes and sort of pop things over that way. But in doing so, I guess the stages here are not necessarily limited, but we're dealing with whatever Xero's kind of telling us in this case. Amazing. Just gonna go through my notes. I think we've, more or less mentioned everything there. Cool. All right. Well, that's ProWorkflow's new financials. Just again, to summarize, we're dealing with costs, we're dealing with charge. We've got a whole lot more in terms of, what those margins are, what things mean, and, what it's going to mean for your project in terms of profitability and the rest, which is really nice to see and a really, really big improvement. I know that Well, yeah, I've definitely heard my share of clients who have kind of been asking after that costing section, and we are, yeah, really, really proud to offer what we've got today. Cool. All right. Well, I've just looked at the time here, and I realized that we've gone a little bit over um our mark, but I see that everyone's still mostly here, so thanks for remaining in
Hey
attendance.
Nat, I just wanted to add something very quickly,
Please
and
do.
it is just because people might start asking to have the preview access of Nexus. I
Mhm.
just wanted to show very quickly how once the preview access mode is activated in your account, you'll be able to go from Classic to Nexus just by going to your bubble with initials or the avatar,
Mm.
whatever you have there. So you'll click in there and then you'll have a new option in your drop-down menu, which is ProWorkflow Nexus, and you'll just click disabled and yes, and then it will switch you to Nexus. And to go from Nexus to Classic, you do the same thing. So I just wanted to add that very quickly. That's it.
Really good mention, actually. Crazy we didn't earlier. You know what that does remind me though? There was another thing that I did think of earlier that we did not talk about, but we should have. Is just the fact that as well as being able to convert projects, from the classic state to Nexus, we've shown you how you can do that singularly just by going to that classics tab, selecting the project in question, and then kind of just moving it through that stage. If you're a larger account, you might be dealing with sort of tens of projects, hundreds of projects. We do have an option available for you that's on request. But if you send us an email or a message, etc., you can basically request that we basically just move all of your active projects into Nexus. Now, I get, worth thinking about. Do be careful. Only insofar as, once something's been moved to Nexus, it's in Nexus now. Classic sort of won't operate with it. So I guess there might be some considerations you want to make in terms of transitioning to this new product. Do you want to kind of have a broader conversation with, your staff members as to when it's happening? Um, or if there is sort of any variety of concern there. Um, but yeah, that's a good mention as well. If you kind of just want to test things out, a great option to do that is just to click on the Classics tab here. You can quickly clone a project, like Derry's demonstrating here. And then once you've cloned that project, you can just move that project over. So that way you kind of retain your original thing. You've still got that sitting there. Um, you know, we can continue with that in Classic as we were, up until the Nexus was provided to your account. And then the clone, that's its own thing. We can convert that to Nexus with really no harm caused, which is great. Now, I'm just going to check through the questions here because I know that a lot of them have been getting answered. Kind of 50. Geez. Okay. Lots of questions is really good to see. But yeah, okay, we've had 50 answered so far. I guess we'll just go through the ones that have been left open. Okay, so we're starting off with Stephanie's question. Is there a group forum we could join to discuss ProWorkflow with other users? Genuinely curious how other users use the software and maybe we could learn from each other. So that's a great question, Stephanie. Maybe, but it depends, I guess, on it's very much an audience participation kind of thing. So we do, in fact, I believe there is a Facebook group that is in existence that I don't think it's been used or has been very active in sort of recent history, but it does exist. No, that's not to say that the concept couldn't sort of I guess go off in a slightly better way. If you'd like to, maybe message us with some interest registered. What we could potentially do is maybe create a group or somewhere in sort of a third party space, maybe a LinkedIn or similar, that you could perhaps join from there. But if there is kind of broader interest in it, what we might do is, I guess, pick a platform, create that for you, and just pop the link out there. Like I say, that Facebook group maybe didn't get as much attention as it needed to, and kind of, you know, fell over a little bit in terms of popularity and attention. But maybe, yeah, maybe Facebook wasn't the platform. Maybe we need to try that again with something like LinkedIn or something a little bit more generalized. But yeah, good question, Stephanie. And like I said, if anybody sort of is broadly keen in that as a concept, flick us a message. Just let us know that you are interested in that kind of thing, and we'll see if we can do something for you to kind of facilitate that a little bit better. Thanks again. Okay, Dale. can we automate due dates when creating a project? i.e. when a project is created and a template is added, item 1 is due in 2 weeks, item 2 is due in 4 weeks, item 3 is due in 7 weeks. And are we able to create dependencies? When item 1 is completed, ProWorkflow creates a due date for item 2 in 2 weeks from item 1's completion date, or a due date's just down to manual edits. Cool. So templates is specifically, you kind of, I guess, used the keyword, but that is how that one happens. So in a given template, as opposed to kind of stating that, this task is due on August 10th and this one's due on August 15th, etc., etc., etc. What you state is basically when the end day of that would be. And it might be that the first one is 5, and then the next one is 10, the next one is 15. When you go to put a template in, it will ask you for a day and basically use that day as a reference point. So day 5 is basically just 5 days after whatever you happen to list in that section. Now, that's how that would work, more or less. It's just you kind of state the relationship between each of those items, and then when you drop in the template, that all gets listed out. Now, as to item dependencies, we do have that as a function. Although it's not necessarily linked as kind of like a hard fixed, if I move one, the other one gets moved the same. But we do have options to kind of highlight multiple tasks and sort of shuffle them as a group, which it roughly meets, I guess, the same kind of need. Fantastic. All right, so hopefully that answers your question, Dale, but let us know if you sort of have any follow-ups there. Question from Ryan. Do clients have the same view, or do they have to switch to Nexus as well? So clients are going to have the same view. So there is a sort of new client equivalent view for Nexus. And more or less once your account has been switched, theirs will also. That's kind of the general game there. Cool. Next question here. Has time entry against items changed? Is the calendar view remaining? So we don't have a calendar view just at this point in time. We do intend to make one, but like I said, the entire product is basically being rebuilt from the ground up. And calendar is something that we haven't quite got to yet. But we are getting there. And as far as time entry against item goes, the only real difference, because we have still, of course, allowed for live tracking, so you can just sort of start a timer on something, run it for the next hour or two, and then stop it when you're done. That's fine. There is also, of course, still manual entry where you can come in and say, throw in a 1.5 hour time record for Monday at 1 p.m. That's, of course, still fine as well. And we still have the timesheet page where you could sort of click and drag and, list out that, I did this amount of time on this day. So I showed that screen a little bit ago. Now, the only thing that I guess we don't have that Classic had is the direct entry page. So that was kind of the one where you could, I guess, kind of bulk into times just by listing out sort of, look, here's all your assigned tasks. I did 1 hour here, 2 hours here, 2 hours here, 3 hours here. And that was largely because of I guess, a use kind of thing. Looks like although you could enter a lot of time entries really quickly there, because it was kind of offering you to track an entire week at once, suffered a little bit in terms of accuracy, and as such, didn't tend to get used too much per the page stats. And as such, it was kind of something that we didn't prioritize as heavily. But again, if that direct entry time page, if we were wrong and not including that yet, do let us know. We'd be more than happy to kind of reinvestigate if there is significant client interest. But thanks for that, Ryan. Next question's from Caroline. So for the item default hourly rates, could we create multiple types of tasks that are named differently, e.g. director, project manager, and have a differently hourly rate for each? Yes, so I would say you could do that through item types. Item types do contain a default hourly rate. As I said, you can rebadge them in terms of what icons are used. You can call them anything else. In this case, I guess they would all be listed based on the various kind of rate that you would have used here. So like you say, director, project manager, and then have a different hourly rate for each. Definitely something that you could do. In fact, I don't see any limitations. I was just trying to churn through that question and to see if I could find any issues with it. But I think I don't imagine that you'd run into any issues there. You could maybe complete a similar kind of or achieve a similar kind of effect, maybe by using a template. Because of course that would, be something that you could then just drop into any given project. But yeah, I guess there's a couple of ways of achieving that, but give it a go, and reach out if you need any help with that. But do let us know what you think of the system, just in terms of its ability to kind of manage those things. Next question is from Dale. Art invoice templates and option, e.g. a template invoice which has pre-filled line items for a particular project type. Yes, great news. Invoice templates will be a returning feature of the Nexus product. Next question. Oh, although I'm going to mention with that one, because you would be using templated data, you would basically be losing out on things like time records and such, because those consist of sort of item data and project data. So you kind of need to be pulling. We're pulling from over here. We would need to be pulling from over here. So invoice template is really, really useful if you are kind of dealing with something that is more maybe dealing with just materials, and you've kind of got your cost per quantity and all of your quantities listed out. But yeah, you can certainly do it nonetheless. I guess it's just a consideration perhaps that your time records live over here and an invoice template is kind of its own thing. Cool. Next question is from Jess. How can you add a cost item in quotes and have it total? So if I had a total of 10 items at a rate of $150, how would it total to create a quote that a client can see the details and approve the costs? So the idea here is that any given item does have sort of a quantity listed and also has the potential to list both a cost rate and a charge rate. So in this case, I'm assuming that this is an item that either it's just going to cost us something, or maybe I'm just charging the client for it, i.e. there isn't necessarily a cost to me when I do it. But in that case, it would be a case of a single line item that was named whatever. There would be a quantity in the quantity section. There would be the 10. In the rate section, that's where you'd make that determination of, yeah, is the 150 figure you mentioned, is that what we're charging them, or is that what the sort of quantity, cost per quantity is for us? But either way, you can create that from the project section, or you can create that from the quote section, and then obviously transfer it between either case. And once you've done so, that's listed there, and the client's either able to view it by logging into ProWorkflow and taking a look at the project page, or we now have a system where you can send the quote to a client, and that will either be approved or not approved, on the basis of. Another good time to mention maybe that we do have a brand new quote approval system. So now that when you send quotes to a client, there's like a digital page where they can kind of determine that, yes, I'm happy with this and I accept it. And that'll sort of get fed back through to your ProWorkflow system. Cool. Thanks for that, Jess. I realize now I've said the word determination a lot. Anyway, inside thoughts. Can you demonstrate importing expenses? We certainly can. Can we demonstrate this right now? What I would need to do to demonstrate this right now is basically create a separate Excel sheet and then send that through, which I think might take a little bit long for I guess the sake of a webinar Q&A kind of section. But if you recall earlier in the section that Dariella made, there was basically an Excel sheet. You can sort of say that these are just expenses that we're sort of listing in here. Fill out any and all detail that you might have with regards to those expenses, and then import them in the tool. So yeah, that's what we'll say. We're not going to demonstrate the process, but it very much does exist. It's very, very easy. And if you do need any help with it, please do send us a message, and we can give you a hand with that. Will this video be shared? From Ryan. It will be, as long as you've registered to the webinar, which, by submission of that question, I have to assume that you did. You'll be getting an email shortly that will have a recorded link of the webinar that you can kind of go back and view things. Equally, we'll be going through and making our own recording and making that just publicly available to everybody. So it might be a case of either waiting for an email or wait for a little pop-up from your ProWorkflow system that'll tell you that's an option. Are we planning on integrating email from Joey so we could link certain emails to projects with one click? Unfortunately, that's not something that we've kind of done yet. Of course, our messaging system has seen a lot of improvements, as you might have seen. There's a whole new format to it. The sort of threading system has been much improved, so it's a lot easier to kind of see what information is related, to which email thread. With that said, we haven't done anything as direct as, say, an integration with your Outlook system, which is, I guess, a couple of steps further. So yeah, messages is better, but I don't know that we have any plans for direct email integration on the cards here. Okay. Sorry, I'm just lots to go through here. Okay, how do I guess just done. Okay. Cool. Question from Jim. What integrations for financials are available, e.g. QuickBooks desktop items related to Nexus items, or will the integration be like now, which is one single QB invoice item, but I have 40 or 50 in my QBDT software for invoicing? Not a clear question. Hopefully that makes sense. Thank you, Jim. I suppose that, yeah, like the integration, like I mentioned, has been improved in the sense that we're going to be seeing, your sort of product libraries getting pulled in. You can see your accounting codes getting pulled in. But I am detecting from your question, we're more talking about things like QuickBooks inventory system, maybe. I think is sort of what we're getting at here. And I guess to answer that question, we're not linking ProWorkflow's items, with QuickBooks item section. Sorry, I know that's probably not correctly termed, but yeah, those will kind of be separate things largely. Sorry to tell you. Okay, next question from Catherine. Is scheduling of time being updated so it's more flexible? Sorry, this has been covered. I missed some of the Zoom. Scheduling of time, we are making some improvements in terms of, I guess the items themselves and those allocations, like I mentioned earlier, how the sort of billable allocation can kind of be distinct from the sort of actual allocation, your expectation of how much time should be spent. At that point, I think it's mostly, beside that point, I should say, it's mostly similar to how Classic works. Although I will say that we do have plans to kind of make improvements to how scheduling and availability works. I guess again, we haven't built these systems yet, but our general discussions have been around the point of how can we basically look at all of our staff members and determine, what their availability should be, i.e. what days are they working, how many hours in a given day do we have available to allocate to them. So that's kind of one side of it, and then the other side of it is how do I be more specific, I guess, with my allocations and kind of say that, I specifically want them to spend 8 hours on this one task on this day, or maybe not 8 hours, but something a little bit less, something a little bit more reasonable. All this to say, not so much yet, but we do have plans to. That's kind of, I guess, some more advanced Nexus, improvements that we intend to kind of make in the near future. Maybe a good time to mention as well, this was kind of a big reason that we wanted to kind of do this really big rebuild. ProWorkflow, we were operating on a bit of, I guess, technical debt that it made it quite difficult to kind of make improvements like that are so broad spanning and kind of impact things as much as they would. But with the new framework that we're operating on with GraphQL, these things have become a lot easier, and sort of making considerations as to how we might approach such problems has become a lot easier. So although that's not, doesn't help in this particular instance in terms of has your problem been dealt with, it is to say that this improvement to Nexus has, will make those changes a lot easier to kind of make and achieve in the future. Okay, questions keep going. Can we export the financials data like margins, etc., into an Excel sheet? We can. So any of the fields that I've mentioned with regards to financials or anything else is now available in reports as well. So you can throw any of that information through the reports. You can then subsequently export that to Excel, which is great. Okay, like another 5-ish questions, I think. We're getting really close. And then we're nearly there. But again, the number of people that are still here is staggering. Thank you so much, everybody, for hanging on. Next one. Okay, Josh. Does Nexus now allow expenses to be allocated or linked to the task item level? Certainly does. So now items can
I was going to say this
literally-
one is exciting. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, we're very excited about that one. So, like we've kind of been talking about, items, they can be expenses. We can sort of determine that this is an expense that's related to such and such. The thing that you might find handy here because I believe, yeah, we have specifically had this request, is we might be dealing with something like, or rather, this could be a use case where sort of having hours tracked and a sort of quantity tracked might be a very useful thing. If you do have an item that you've said, yep, we want to use hours and we also want to use quantity to kind of determine this, determine again, there you go, I keep doing it. But if you do have those, it's kind of important to keep an eye on both. We do actually allow you to set these sort of cost price, sale price, and charge rate and cost rate. So this is a situation where, yeah, those two might be the same thing. We can kind of directly see that, right, there is a charge, there is an expense, there is sort of a quantity that cost that's related, to a given item that also has time tracked, that also has, cost rates, charge rates attached to it. With that said, our phase system might be really helpful there as well. It might be that you kind of want to separate this stuff out, so you've got time being tracked and done, and that's charged against a certain rate, etc. And then as well as that, we would have a system where, as a part of the same phase, you might have an expense there, and then that's to a certain cost value, and then that phase section would sort of total all that up. So for that section, for this entire phase, this was the revenue contributing activities, and then this one down here is just a pure kind of cost. And then that would also take into account, what it cost you to actually get the labor on those tasks as well. Cool. Thanks so much for that, Josh. Give me just 1 second. Sorry. Okay. Just gonna close that. Apologies, I've just got a Teams window in the background that kept dinging and kept alerting me to, anyway, not important. Next question that we have here is from Stephen. Point of clarification. We currently have to type project expenses into projects manually. Is there a way with Nexus that if expenses are in 0 to import them into ProWorkflow? Whilst I mentioned earlier that we can import expenses into ProWorkflow from Excel, they're not necessarily directly linked to 0. So I guess short answer, no, long answer, kind of, even though that's not a particularly long answer, to be fair. Yeah, sorry, I don't have kind of anything.
Sorry, Natasha, I'll just jump
Yeah.
in. But this is something that we have seen a lot of in terms of the Q&A. A lot of people have asked for this sort of particular feature. So we'll definitely talk about it internally and discuss what is possible. And we'll potentially have a few meetings with our customers as well, see their use cases and understand how they use expenses in 0 and make it work in ProWorkflow.
Well, how about that? There you go. Sounds like there's something to look forward to there. Amazing. I guess as with any updates from ProWorkflow, we'll be working on things, and anything we do work on, we'll let you know usually via system alert. So keep an eye out. If we do have any sort of firm plans on how we intend to deal with that, you'll find out from within the tool. Cool. Next question here is from Dale. What avenues are available for training? For example, video guides, support articles, direct training, etc. Amazing. So, avenues of support are going to remain largely the same as they are now, would you believe? So that means you'll have access to both myself and the rest of the CX team. That was Ashley and Dariella. We're happy to sit down with you in a Zoom to kind of help you with the transition to Nexus, answer any more specific questions that you might have, etc. We have also, in advance of this release, written a whole bunch of more support guides with regards to Nexus. So that kind of goes through most of what we've talked here today. I think there's nearly about 50 articles there that you can have sort of a read through. And yeah, now that I guess we've got ProWorkflow locked down, or Nexus rather, locked down in a more visual capacity, we'll have a slightly easier time with, adding a few more videos back into the system. Although if you do check out, say, our LinkedIn page and our YouTube channel, there are, a few videos that we've uploaded as well. I guess the only consideration to make with the videos is that releases just happened. Whereas before, we had sort of the full video suite that helped with pretty much anything you could think of. We have to build that back out. So so far, yeah, support articles have been built back out. You'll always have access to us by way of the chat support systems. You can give us a call. We've got Zoom meetings that we can join you in on. But yeah, videos is something that Cough, cough. Still building back up. Thanks for that. Okay, last question, unless somebody pops another one in before I'm finished answering this one. Um, if I had an expense invoice in Classic, that affects the project financial total. Can we separate out expenses from service invoices? Should be able to, yeah. So that might be a case where you have the expense listed as an item and then mark that item as non-billable. That way it's not going to be included in the invoice. And you can maybe compare that figure to, what the sort of total invoice figure might be. But again, with the amount of sort of customization and options that we've added to the kind of item section and the capacities you've got there, yeah, this is exactly the kind of thing that we added the customizations for to make sure that you could sort of achieve things like that. Cool. Well, no one has asked any questions in the amount of time that it took to get through that last one. So that was, 75 questions all totaled up. Impressive for everyone that attended. Thanks so much. I guess we can end there. Yeah, we're only a half hour over time, but I do have to thank you, everyone that sort of stayed on for the entirety of the webinar, even the half hour over that we went. So yeah, sounds like to do items for us is, I guess, reach out to everybody and sort of determine it, said it again. If we need to be thinking about maybe a community sort of page or area where customers can interact with each other. But beyond that, hopefully you've liked our presentation of Nexus and sort of some of the improvements that we've made. Remember that there's going to be a survey going out to you shortly where you can indicate that you've got an interest to have your account upgraded to Nexus. But yeah, even if, I don't know, you miss that or whatever else happens, you just need to reach out to us and let us know that, like, hey, I've got an account with you and I'd like you to upgrade that to Nexus, and we're happy to do that for you. And again, any questions that you might have about Nexus or otherwise, please do let us know and we're more than happy to answer them. Whole webinar has been recorded. We'll be making that public for anyone that needs it, really. But that'll be going up in the tool in some amount of time shortly. But as a registered attendee of the webinar, you'll be having that sent through to your email shortly. But yeah, broad thank yous to all. It was really good to have everybody here. Obviously, lots of people on the webinar, but that just makes it all the more exciting to be announcing something like a new product. I guess that's it from me. I've been talking for a minute now, but it has I guess been great to talk to all of you, and can't wait to hear what you think. All right, have a great rest of your day. Okay, hold on. Okay, there was one last question. Can we have the Q&A sent, please? I'll see if I can maybe get that into a text file and populate that out while we share the rest of it with you. But we'll see if we can get that out. Yeah. Okay, now I'm gonna say goodbye for real. That's the one more question. Guys, come on. My team uses the current app, iOS and Android for time tracking. Will Nexus have a new app? That's a really good point, actually, Josh. We absolutely didn't mention that at all. Nexus will definitely be getting a new app. So again, because basically Nexus is dealing with a bunch of different data that Classic, didn't really need to deal with. Am I phrasing that right? We have needed to develop a new app. I believe it is on the Apple App Store already. I don't know that it's on the Google Play Store yet. But it will be, I guess, just the more newly released one. I think it might even be labeled as Nexus, I think.
Yeah, you can download the Nexus
okay.
app. Yeah.
I think it's somebody else new. Okay. But yeah, that'll be out as well. Okay. This time we're saying goodbye for real, I think. No new questions. Sorry, was that one from you, Terry? That wasn't one from you.
No, I was just saying goodbye as well.
Okay,
Goodbye. Thank you for coming.
Fine. That's allowed. Okay, cool. All right. Well, thanks everybody again. It was really good talking to you. And yeah, reach out if anything piques your interest or you'd like to talk to us about the new product. Thanks again for attending. We'll catch you next time.